Hey guys, welcome back to Teal House Farm, and it's Tuesday, so you know what that means. It's time to do a recipe from the canning pantry. Today we're going to make some homemade pumpkin soup and some quick bread to enjoy for lunch. So for the bread, we're actually just going to use my bread machine. I have a kitchen arm, like a smart bread machine. It does a lot of things. It makes like yogurt and jam, and it's pretty darn cool. But it has an express bread cycle. It makes just like a white bread, and it makes it in it's either 70 or 80 minutes. So I'm going to start that first, and then we'll make the soup, and then they should kind of all be done about the same time, and I can have some nice warm soup and some warm bread for lunch today, which will be great. The kids, I already made their lunch. They always like to eat lunch at like 11 o'clock, and I'm just not hungry. So a 12:30 to 1 o'clock lunch is going to be perfect for me, and it's getting a little cooler. It's fall, so some soup and bread sounds perfect. And Sam should be home about lunchtime today, so he can have some too if he hasn't already eaten something on the way home. So from the canning pantry for the soup, yes. So from the canning pantry, this recipe is actually really, really simple. And from the canning pantry, okay, here's your cover. We are going to need 2 pints of our home canned pumpkin. And just a reminder, you're probably getting ready to put pumpkins out for fall as decorations. If you don't cut them into jack-o'-lanterns and they're still in good shape when fall is kind of ending and you're putting away those decorations, save them and can them, and they'll become food later for things like pumpkin soup and pumpkin bread. And we're going to need a quart of chicken broth. Now, you also need a pint's worth of onions, and I am out of onions in my canning pantry because I use them all the time, so I need to can more. So today we're just going to use 2 onions that I'm going to dice up, but no, you could definitely use about a pint's worth of onions from your canning pantry instead of dicing a fresh onion, which will save you some steps to make this go even faster. Let's go ahead and we'll start the bread, and then we'll start the soup, and then we'll enjoy a yummy lunch. Okay, we're gonna get the bread maker out and get it ready to go. I'll link this bread maker below. It was a gift from a viewer, and it has been just awesome. And it has so many really neat recipes. And this express white bread we're gonna make is great because we can get a nice hot loaf of bread on the table in about 90 minutes. So it's going to use 1 cup of warm water, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 3/4 tablespoon of white sugar, a teaspoon of salt, and then 3 1/8 cups of bread flour, and 2 teaspoons of instant dry yeast. And that is a lot of yeast. That's one of the ways it makes it express, is because it's using extra yeast so you get rise faster. I will also write that recipe in the description below if you just want to copy and paste. And we're going to make, this is for a 1.5 pound loaf. So if your bread machine has an express bake on it, this is for a 1.5 pound loaf. I like the crust a little more done, so it's going to take a little bit longer, but that's okay. So we're going to go ahead and get it started, and once it has about an hour left, we're going to start on our soup. So we're going to give the bread maker a head start. Next up on the soup, I've put the onions in the pot, plus a couple tablespoons of olive oil and a couple cloves worth of minced garlic. And we're just going to saute those for about 5 minutes so that the onions are translucent. I'm also going to add this butternut squash from my garden. It's tiny, it fell off the vine. It's too small to really do much with for our family for a meal, so I'm going to throw it in with the pumpkins. In case you didn't know, a lot of canned pumpkin pies and things like that, they use butternut squash as well because it has a better texture than pumpkin. Pumpkin can get a little bit stringy, but this nice winter squash is not going to do that. All right, we're gonna mix that all together with our chunk of winter squash, and then we're going to add our quart of chicken broth as well. You could use a vegetable broth if you wanted to go ahead and make this a vegetarian soup. That'd be just fine, but I have tons of chicken broth in the pantry, so that's what we're gonna use today. So in the pot, we've got the garlic, the onions, the raw butternut squash, and the chicken broth, and we're gonna cover and let it simmer for about 20 minutes. And after that, we're gonna go ahead and pop open our 2 pints of canned pumpkin, and we're gonna add those in and warm them through. They're already fully cooked, right? Because they've been canned, so that's why we add them in at the end. After they've simmered in there with everything else for about 5 minutes, we're gonna get out our immersion blender and we're gonna mash everything together. I also added about a teaspoon of salt and a little bit of black pepper just for better taste. The broth also has some herbs in it, so that's going to add flavor as well. And pumpkin's got a pretty distinct flavor, so you're definitely going to taste that. If you don't have an immersion blender, you could take it off the stove and run it in batches through your regular blender, but I highly recommend getting an immersion blender. It makes life a lot faster and you don't make as many pots dirty. Gonna be pretty patient. We're gonna make sure we get all the chunks. I want a really smooth soup. And once we have that, we're gonna add just a little bit of whole milk. You could use heavy cream as well too. I probably added about a 1/4 cup. You don't want your soup too runny, but the milk or the heavy cream is gonna add some dimension to your soup. Hit it with the blender again, and then it's ready to go. So let's get our bread out. Our bread is done. Shake it out of the pan. It looks great. I love how dark and crusty the crust is. And it's still pretty hot, but I'm hungry, so we're gonna go ahead and slice the top off. We're gonna get some butter on it, maybe some honey on it, and enjoy it with our soup. Added some apple slices, and that's looking good. I'm looking forward to lunch. Okay, we got some leftover bread. We'll just wrap this up for dinner. And this is actually fairly crusty for a quick bread. Usually quick breads, they have kind of like a, I don't know, stodgy texture, not a nice crust. But this one actually comes out really good. I really like that cycle on that bread maker because you get a nice bread without waiting 4 hours. So we're gonna just pack up our leftovers. Lots of soup left. I'm just gonna use jars, and I'm going to probably freeze them. And when you freeze soup in jars, you wanna make sure you leave a good amount of headspace, maybe 2 inches, because liquid expands when it's frozen, and if there's not enough room in the jar, it's going to explode out of the jar. Can you can this? And my answer for you is no, because it has milk or cream in it, depending which one you used, and that is not recommended for home canning. Do people do it? Absolutely. So it's kind of up to you. It's not something, that is not a rule I'm comfortable breaking. So with leftovers, I'm going to choose to freeze them. Probably freeze one and leave one in the fridge to have later this week. So basically that recipe made me 3 lunch soups, which is great. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all with another recipe from the Canning Pantry next Tuesday. Bye.